All right, guys, welcome back to another tier list video. Today's tier list is going to be with the Blaziken patch. So Blaziken just came out. It's been about a few days. I want to give my thoughts on the character itself. So if you're interested in my opinions on Blaziken, this is the video for that. The purpose of this tier list is mostly to address some new and returning players. I feel like a lot of times people will ask me, hey, should I invest time in this character? Should I waste my gems or my EOS coins on this character? And hopefully this video can serve as a stepping ground for people that are being introduced to the game. And if you're a more advanced player and you're playing the game for a while, it's a good opportunity for you to hear someone else's thoughts on a particular character, whether it be your main or something that you might be interested in trying out. First things first, we're going to talk about Blaziken, and I'll open some random Blaziken footage I was able to find from the other day. I think this character is really underrated right now. A lot of people are upset that the character isn't completely broken. I don't know if it's because they spent gems on it and they're expecting to get just free wins by auto-playing this character. That's definitely not the case. It's simple in that its abilities aren't overly complex, but the character has to pick and choose its fights. You definitely can't just face roll all your abilities all in and hope to get a kill. In the way that I think a lot of people compare this character to Rapid Strike Urshifu. You know, Water Bear, they're like, oh, you know, you have a bunch of dashes, maybe you get a kill. Oh, I didn't get a kill. It's just worse than Water Bear. It's a bad character. But I think if you think of this character as Water Bear, you're going to struggle. If you think of it more like this is a melee version of Mew, and that you have to play around your cooldowns, you have to set up a fight where you can use your cooldowns, swap, use your cooldowns again, and then have something to still escape, and then swap back, and you know, you keep playing like this infinite fight, then you'll have a lot more successes. And I think once I made that mental shift, that combined with me changing my items and how I approach the character, I started having a lot more success. So initially I tried playing things like Razor Claw and Muscle Band, and I wanted to be more focused around my auto attacks. I looked at the ratios of the character, I looked at my own gameplay, and I was like, you know what? Most of my damage is coming from my abilities. I think I should invest more in just making my abilities stronger. So attack weight, I think, is a must on this character. You have a good enough early game that you can stack, so you can really make use of the extra attack weight stacks. And weakness policy, I think, adds on top of that. You get more attack stat. It scales off of your attack weight itself. The HP goes a really long way on this character as well. And then your last item, I think, is a little bit flexible. I think you could add back that Muscle or Razor Claw for some additional damage. I don't think that'd be a bad idea at all. You could mess around with the Bangle for more flat stats, or Floatstone. The mobility might help as well. I've been going for Focus Band. I think just having that extra survivability in fights, having like one extra cooldown to take advantage of, allows you to play your fights really well. But overall, I think the character has a lot of useful things in its kit. Some things that I want to point out that it has that other characters might have, other characters might not have, but are really good, is it's a melee character that has a ranged poke ability. Focus Blast, it's a long cooldown, but when you're at a raid fight or you're at a standoff fight, having the ability to just throw a ranged nuke that slows is unlike a lot of other all-rounders. You have a secure ability, right? I mean, Lucario or Single Strike Urshifu, these characters have Pup and Wicked Blow, but you have your own version of that. It's not necessarily as strong, but Overheat, if you've been watching me on stream, I've probably secured, out of my last 10 games, I think I've probably gotten 8 Rayquazas with Overheat. The ability is really underrated as a secure, and I feel like not enough people are respecting it. You've got obviously Fire Punch, which is kind of similar to Surging Strikes from Urshifu. Not quite. I'd say it's more comparable to like a little bit like Extreme Speed, somewhere between like Tsareena's mobility, but you have some good in-fight mobility with some good damage. Blaze Kick, it's kind of like Garchomp's Dragon Rush, in that you can get behind your opponents and scoop them into your team. And one really cool combo you can do in the early game is when you're still a Combuskin, you can Aerial Ace in, Blaze Kick out, like Aerial Ace the bees, the Altarias, Blaze Kick them towards your base, and then Aerial Ace them again to last hit them, right? And tools like that are really important. It's what makes characters really strong throughout the game. And I think there's so many other combos you can do with Blaziken that maybe even I haven't discovered yet. So I think give this character a shot if you're interested in characters like Mew that have the ability to swap around. If you like E-Speed Lucario, you like Tsareena, you like Single Strike Urshifu, you might also like this character. You have a lot of different combos. But I would say if you allow yourself to mental block that this is just an Urshifu character, which is what I did day one, I think you might struggle having fun with this character. And overall, I would say it's probably some of the most fun I've had playing a character in Unite. It really reminds me of the first time I learned Mew, where like every time I leave a fight, I'm like, oh, there's something I could have done better. It's really, really interesting. And it's not as complex as Mew. You're not making a lot of decisions. Whereas in Mew, you have to choose what you're going to swap to. You always swap to the same set of abilities on this character. So that being said, to start off the tier list, I would give Blaziken a solid A tier. Like, I don't think it's completely broken. I don't know if I'd put in the S tier. I might bump it down to B, but I think it's somewhere in between here. Like, slightly above average, really, really strong, and overall lots of fun. I don't think you can go wrong in investing in this character. I just don't think it's in that like turbo broken tier. But yeah, something to keep in mind: Buddy Barrier and Energy Amp. While it might seem really appealing on this character, I believe Buddy Barrier has a 1 minute cooldown as opposed to 30 seconds on most characters, and Energy Amp has a 30-second cooldown as opposed to 15-second on most characters. So I wouldn't play those items on this one. No. The easiest one to put up here, I don't even think it deserves to be in the S tier. We put it in the Y tier. Mewtwo Y. If you've been playing Pokemon Unite over the last 2 weeks, you can probably attest to this character probably being the bane of your existence. You're either a Mewtwo Y player and you're bullying everyone, or you're not and you get bullied by everyone. Probably the only character I would say is like threatening the integrity of the game. It's just not balanced. It's completely overpowered, and the character's really, really easy to play. Like it's almost like polar opposite to Blaziken, in that Blaziken is, you know, pretty strong, but pretty difficult to get its full potential. Mewtwo Y, like any average, you know, auto attack Andy can achieve like 75% of Mewtwo's potential. Whereas that same player would probably reach like 25% of Blaziken's potential. Absolutely ridiculous character. Obviously, if you want to get some free wins, just pick this character, show up to fights, and hold down the A button, and you'll probably be fine. Something that I think I might not have mentioned at the start, but this tier list is around ladder play. So for competitive play where you have access to draft, the game is a bit different. There's characters that are better in draft than they are in a blind pick situation. So just something to keep at the back of your mind. But the highest win rate character, surprisingly, isn't Mewtwo Y. It is Blissey, which I think will top the S tier rank in this tier list, simply because the character was always good. Blissey's never been a bad character. Sometimes it's been, you know, outshined by other supporters in the game, but Blissey's always been good. The Unite move, it's a multi-purpose ability in that it's a secure, it's a damage move, it's a peeling move, it's a steroid for your carry. Basically, you Blissey out the best character on your team, the strongest character, and you watch them pop off, all while also doing a big nuke. That being said, right now it's the second best character, if not the best character in the game, simply because if you pair it with the Mewtwo Y, the Mewtwo Y won't die. You can make it attack faster through Helping Hand. You can get it out of CC with Safeguard. And it's just too broken. This combo together is probably the worst or strongest, depending on how you want to look at it, 2-character combo we've ever seen in Unite. And I think it probably can't get worse than this. This is better than Zacian Comfy at its peak. It's better than any other Blissey pocket we've ever had before. It's better than any Hoopa's dual partner you can get. It's the strongest 1-2 punch in the history of Unite, and hopefully it doesn't get any worse than this. But let's talk about another character that I kind of mentioned a little bit earlier, Mew. So I think Mew, like Blaziken, is pretty complex. when Mew first came out, it was definitely close to the power level that Mewtwo Y is at right now, in that the character was able to dish out so much damage. Mew has, you know, and still has so much mobility, CC, just so versatile. But right now, in the current meta, I would say that Mew is probably where I would want to see a character be. Like, Mew and Blaziken alike, where, you know, if you're ahead, you can, this character looks absolutely broken. You never die, you swap moves, you feel good, you look good. Like, the character is really, really strong. And I would say Mew is never going to be a bad character. So if there's a character you're looking to invest time and skill into, I would say it's Mew. Like, I don't think this mon is ever going to be bad. That being said, on the ladder play, particularly solo queue, sometimes you can run into trouble on this character, where if your team has a really bad early game and you're not able to get off the ground running, you can fall behind in XP. And this character is particularly difficult to get farm on once you fall behind, because your abilities scale really well with levels. And if you fall behind on your XP, it can be kind of hard to catch up. At the same time, it's hard to get kills. It's hard to get knockouts and really come back into the game. But if you're very diligent on making sure you approach the end game with good XP, as a solid Mew player, you can have a really big influence in endgame fights. So I think the character is solid. I'd put it somewhere between A and B, and I might move it throughout the course of this tier list, but it's somewhere in the middle, somewhere where I'm happy with it being. Let's talk about some more all-rounders, because we did mention them alongside Blaziken. One of the ones in particular that recently got buffed is Tsareena. Now, it's hard to kind of rate Tsareena, because the character, when it's ahead, is absolutely demonic. If you're level 13 when the rest of the game is 11, you're demonic. But most characters in the game are like that. If you're 2 levels ahead, there's not really a character that looks pretty bad. And Tsareena's a character that kind of has the tools to get ahead. You know, if you stay on course with your opponents, you get stacked up. Your Unite move can guarantee you a lot of knockouts and push you ahead into the game. But at the same time, you have such a weak early game. And remember, on ladder play, you never really know what you're going up against, right? Some games you might queue up as Tsareena, and it might feel like an A+ tier champion, A+ tier Pokemon, because you're laning up against like a T-Tar and a Gardevoir, and it's like, oh, I got 6 stacked, I'm level 6, I killed the Larvitar behind their pad, and now the game's over. Tsareena's looking great, and Tsareena's really good in those games. It's really good at punishing weaker lanes than itself. But the character's laning phase on its own isn't great. Like, imagine now you're up against like a Mamo and a Pikachu instead. All of a sudden, you're not gonna get any stacks. How are you supposed to come back into the game? You're a level 5 Steenie. Mamoswine drops the ice rocks on your head. Pikachu's stunning you. Pikachu hits 9 before you do, and it solo ults you, and you never come back in the game, right? So I think even though it got buffs, I think the buffs brought it from like a D/F tier character to a C tier character. If you want to invest time in playing in Tsareena, you can definitely win games, but just know with blind pick, you're gonna run into bad games, and that's just the reality of the character. Some games are gonna be bad. On the opposite side of the spectrum, we have a character that formerly was the S+ tier of Unite in Lucario. I actually think Lucario is, if I was to give the most underrated tag to any character in the game, it's Lucario. I think it's a character that almost never is bad. There are very few lane matchups in the early game that are so bad that you won't be able to at least get some sort of stacks. If you do get stacked up on this character, you can completely take over a game. One thing that makes characters just good, in my opinion, in solo queue in particular, is if you have a good last hitting tool, like a good objective securing tool. And Lucario is one of the best at it, right? Power up punch Lucario. Once you're level 11, you have the guaranteed unstoppable with it. You can go and get your team Regis that you might not have been able to secure, even last hits like Indeedee in the lane that you might not normally be able to secure. You can pick up kills off the map. And with the buff to its Unite move a couple months ago, I think the character has so much potential on the open map. You break those tier 1 goal zones early on, you walk into the enemy jungle, that blue buff is yours, that red buff is yours. Anyone tries to contest you, you just solo ult them, run to a pad, and you start capping again, right? I think this character has so many winning tools in the game that if there's a mon that you're looking to pick up to have consistent games on, and you don't want to be cringe at like playing Mewtwo or anything, Lucario is definitely one of them. A character that recently got buffed, and we'll switch it around a little bit, we'll talk about some attackers now, is Pikachu. I think this character, like Lucario, is just a solid like solo queue kind of character. It doesn't have like horrendously bad matchups. You know, you can walk into a lane, you're a strong laner, you can always have some good success. We saw some buffs in the double ground moves ability, Thunderbolt. And I think the character easily moved up from either B or C tier to an A tier character. The buffs really helped, but the biggest buff this character got was access to the cursed pot, the cursed incense item. Just having anti-heal coupled with Thunderbolt, which you can use from such a long range, makes this character basically have a mini Delphox ult. You go to enemy pad, you drop that Thunderbolt combo, and they can't even live on their pad unless your team siege. Same thing when you're contesting Altarias around the map, whether it's in the middle or the bottom or the top side of the map. You're strong in the laning phase of the game. You have good comeback tools, which is really important about Unite as well. You have a really low cooldown Unite move, which you can couple with Energy Amp, and you just have really, really good map play with that. Lutano coming in with the raid, interrupting us with some Pika Butts. What's up, everyone? You guys, good timing here. We're just in the beginning of starting my tier list, so, and you guys come in with the Pika Butts on the Pikachu, I like it. But yeah, overall, Pikachu's an A tier character on ladder play. It's never too bad, and I think it's one of the best attackers that you can pick up right now, especially. I don't think this character is going to get nerfed, so it's like good insurance policy. I think it'll be good. If it gets any kind of nerfs, they'll be minor to a point where it'll still be playable, but I doubt they touch this character anytime soon. Speaking of attackers that are good, that might get nerfed, are Inteleon. I'd say this is an easy candidate for S tier in the attacker role. Character's really, really strong in the early game. Water Gun's one of the best laning lasted abilities in the game. Those guaranteed crits are really annoying. It's got two really viable movesets in both Snipe Shot and Liquidation. Liquidation is, I'd say, much more easier to pilot of the two. Just point and click, guaranteed damage. Like we used to have Glaceon, which Glaceon's still around today, but like Glaceon's Icicle Spears, you cast it on someone, they end up taking a lot of damage. Really good at taking down frontline characters. You can, if you want, you can even run the new cursed item on this character, particularly with Liquidation. It's really solid at bringing down frontlines if you really want that item as well. The Unite move is good. I just think this character is just really strong. I would expect it to see some nerfs in probably the next major balance patch we have, but if it dodges another round of nerfs, cool. If you're an Inteleon main, good for you. But I do think this character is ridiculous. Pretty simple to pick up as well. Where shall we land next? Well, we haven't talked about supporters in a while, so let's talk about one of my favorite characters in the game, Eldegoss. Now, I think Eldegoss is a great character. I think it's a character that will almost never be bad in Pokemon Unite. The reason for that is you just have so many different tools as Eld to help influence the early game. And I don't really know if they would nerf this character before they approach other characters. Eldegoss, if you don't know, a lot of its power comes in the early game by putting on a muscle band and actually just harassing your opponents. We look at some of the characters I talked about earlier, Tsareena, Lucario, Blaziken. All these characters want to stack in the early game. You stand near your pad, you press your A button on them, you spam the leafage, and you're probably going to get a knockout if the enemy team isn't careful about your damage output. With that, you also have some really good anti-dive capabilities with your character. You might not be able to influence how the dive is happening, like if your team has a Tsareena running at it or a Lucario or a Blaziken, but simply just giving your team Palm Puff and Cotton Guard, that extra HP, can make it really hard for these melee characters to get kills on your backline. So I think it's a solid character. One of the only things that it really lacks that I think makes a character really good for solo queue is that it doesn't have a great secure on objectives. Your Unite move is not bad, and it can definitely be useful sometimes to secure objectives, but it really does feel bad as Eldegoss sometimes when, you know, you're in like a contested objective situation, you know, maybe you've already used your Unite move, and you have like very little influence on being able to get the last hit. That being said, with Muscle Band, if you ever do get a bunch of knockouts on the enemy team, your ability to rip down Rayquaza is probably one of the best out of any of the other supporters in the game, even better than some attackers, to just put good, consistent damage on objectives. So I think it's a good character. If you're looking to play a supporter that's interesting, and I think will never be bad and is good in every team comp, especially in solo queue, I think Eldegoss is probably your best bet. Eldegoss's partner Pokemon as a range supporter is Hoopa. I think Hoopa very close to Eld in terms of ladder play. And I could put them beside each other. And I'll put them beside each other. I do think Eld might be a little bit more consistent to get wins on, but Hoopa definitely has a lot of gameplay to it as well. And then the more annoying thing about ladder play is that sometimes it's harder to trust your teammates to utilize this character to its fullest potential. But even as someone that's played like a lot of Hoopa games, I see my teammates make good plays with it sometimes. And people are just getting better and better at it. One thing I will say is oftentimes people will ask like, oh, Hoopa is so bad in solo queue, my teammates never take the portals. I hate it. Like, it's so annoying, I don't want to play it anymore. But if you watch me play Hoopa in solo queue, sometimes even in competitive, I'm not too concerned. I'm not overly concerned about my teammates all the time. You, just as a solo character, being able to bounce in and out of portals and harass the enemy team, you can put a lot of pressure on in Hoopa. And if you put good portals, like sometimes Hoopa players won't put good portals down for their teammates, and then they'll complain that they didn't find it. You know, try to put obvious portals, put it in the line of sight of your characters, put it in the direction that you think that they should be walking to. Sometimes just put it on top of their head. You know, if you're playing with a character that has an unstoppable, like a Lucario, even Blaziken, if you see your Blaziken, you know, Blaze kicked in, put the portal on top of their head. Or if you see them charging overheat, put it like right after they start charging overheat, they'll finish their overheat and then they'll go to the portal, be able to have some cooldowns reset, come back into the fight. So be smart about it, and the character's really good. Obviously, the Unite move can win you games alone, but if you put a bad Unite move portal down, you could cost your team the game as well. But I do think the character is very strong, and it shouldn't be underestimated in solo queue, especially. Cool. We talked about some supporters. I don't see any blue on the tier list, so let's move over to some speedsters. I'd say the role for the best speedster in the game probably right now is in between these three: Leafeon, Dodrio, and Zoroark. For ladder play, I would say I want to give the edge over to Leafeon. It's hard to put it in between A and B tier. If I'm looking at the characters in the A tier, do I think it stacks up with them? Yeah. I would say yeah. The good thing about Leafeon is it has such a low Unite move cooldown, which is really important in solo queue and in duo and trios as well, because you can just, you know, you can show up to like a skirmish, Unite move someone, use your speed off your Unite move to run to a cap, get some leftover stacks, get your Unite move cooldown back. And because the games are so messy, you can just constantly throw out a bunch of different Unite moves. If this was pure competitive play, I would say that, you know, those advantages might not apply to Leafeon as much as it does in like a more ranked ladder situation. And yeah, being able to get ahead and actually one-shot the enemy Mewtwo is pretty strong. Though you do have to be careful. Mewtwo surprisingly has a lot of different tools to be able to deal with speedsters pretty well. If the enemy speedster doesn't have full heal or their full heal's on cooldown, one simple future sight and recover and walk away, and most speedsters ganks are, you know, dead in the water at that point. So you do need to be careful, and which is why I would say both Zoroark and Dodrio I'd move down a tier, because these characters are a lot more reliant on full heal. Especially Zoroark, like if you don't have that full heal up, you're just going to get bopped by the Future Sight from Mewtwo-Y. You're just going to get A-pressed, to be honest. And if the Mewtwo-Y has any support near it, you're not going to be able to bring it down before it just pretty much kills you with the A button. These characters, these speedsters, are harder to hit with Mewtwo's Unite. But if they ever get hit by a Mewtwo Unite, they're also just simply it's over for them. Dodrio right now in the current patch does seem to be a little bit bugged in that they've changed some of the drill peck interactions around walls. I would say that these changes are probably temporary and they'll go back and fix them. But if you are tuning in right now, you're watching this live or on YouTube, just keep that in mind if you're a Dodrio main. Drill peck no longer glides along walls. It completely gets stuck on walls right now. And I think they've also nerfed the width radius of this move a little bit from where it was a couple months ago as well. Cool. Let's add some defenders onto this tier list because there's some very, very strong defenders. Another character that sits at the S tier is Lapras. I think everyone was surprised in the last patch that Lapras didn't get any nerfs. I was surprised. This character as a defender has way too much damage output. Perish Song pretty much 1v1s any melee character in the game. You get this character a couple stacks, you find it in the late game, it's completely unkillable. It gets free boosted from its Perish Song, and every boosted heals 9% of your HP. You have a passive that adds damage reduction as well. And then all of that, you add all of that together, and Lapras also has a good, strong early game. You can get those stacks. And then you have an 89-second Unite move that allows you to completely tank any ability in the game you want because you get this massive shield. And you can dive any backline character you want and pretty much knock them out. With Perish Song, Ice Beam, and your Unite move, you have pretty much an instant and full stun lock combo that can 100-0 any non-defender character in the game. Pretty much every single attacker in the game will die if they get hit by a Lapras ult because the Ice Beam comes right after. You get frozen by the Ice Beam and then you're just dead to triple Perish Song. So yeah, this character is ridiculous. It sits at the top of the S tier. Not sure why it didn't get nerfed. I think the reasoning why it might not have gotten nerfed is because the introduction of the curse items makes it so Lapras has a tougher time going infinite on its healing from its boosted autos. But I don't think that's enough of a justification. One, the character can use the item itself if you want to. You don't need to stack necessarily. And two, it affects a lot of characters across the board as well. So it's not big enough on just Lapras for that character to be considered nerfed. And I think it's by far one of the best, if not the best, non-Mewtwo-Y character in the game. Umbreon, on the other hand, a character that did get nerfed in the last patch and has been getting nerfed throughout the course of its release, I think is an A tier character. I might move this character even to B tier, but I think it sits somewhere comfortably around the A tier. The reason for, I think, Umbreon being kind of underwhelming is in a more coordinated environment, obviously this character can go really, really hard. But in ranked play, particularly solo queue, sometimes you can have a tough time hitting level 4. You can fall slightly behind. And if you ever fall behind on Umbreon like that, the character starts to feel really, really bad. Your last hitting tools in lane and just throughout the game aren't that strong. Even if you go foul play Snarl, like 2 damage abilities, you know, if you're ever left alone, it's really hard for you to secure last hits. Snarl got some pretty big nerfs in that it reduces a much less portion of opponents' attacks. So it's a lot harder to live against melee characters. It got the same kind of indirect nerf from the curse items as well because it's boosted also heals. Mean Look is a great ability, but it's a setup ability that requires your team to follow up. And you have no mobility if you go Mean Look. So just waddling up to people, mean looking them, and relying on your teammates to follow up, even if you have decently good teammates in solo queue, it's difficult to secure kills around it sometimes. I do think in some good circumstances, a character can pop off, but in blind pick, when you don't know what you're playing into, Umbreon can struggle. Its Unite move is pretty hit or miss too. If the enemy team has a Blastoise or a Crustle or a Wigglytuff, yeah, your Unite move gets great value. But if they've got like a couple speedsters, some attackers, and maybe like one defender or supporter that doesn't get a big shield from their Unite, your Unite move doesn't get that much value, and that can be a problem, especially in messier games. So I think it definitely sits somewhere between the A tier. I might move it down to the B tier, but it's somewhere around here for now, for sure. Obviously, it's not horrible. I mentioned Crustle and Blastoise. Why not we bring those characters up right now as well? Crustle is one of my favorite characters right now to play. I think it's another A tier character. I don't even care if the enemy team has an Umbreon. I can wait to use my Unite move if I have to. But the Rockman, I think Rock Tomb is probably one of the most underrated single-use moves in the game. Just having access to what is it, like 60% slow, 80% on the upgraded version. Whether you go Rock Tomb Scizor or Rock Tomb Stealth Rock Tomb can trap so many characters in the game, and it's not even funny. I think this character in draft has always had a place in Pokemon Unite, and we only ever really saw like one European team in competitive take advantage of it. But if you're ever playing against characters that have no mobility spells, and there's a lot of those in the game, you can just Rock Tomb them and either combo them with a Stealth Rock or Scizor, and you're pretty much forcing them to eject, or they're getting knocked out. Characters like Pikachu, A9, which has been popular for a really long time, even Eldegoss, other tanks like Blissey, and some other characters you'll see throughout the game as well, they don't have dash moves. Gardevoir, Hyper Voice Sylveon. What are you supposed to do if you get stuck in a Rock Tomb as an Espeon, right? You just end up taking so much free damage. Character has really good early game. It's tanky. I think it's just a solid character to win games on. And I've been really enjoying the Bengal Crustle with Stealth Rock, just having like another source of anti-healing, that mini Delphox ult, like I talked about Pikachu. And Crustle kind of has the same kind of gameplay with that. So as long as you're going Rock Tomb, this character is really good. Shell Smash, Scizor, like that one-shot crit build is decent as well, but I think it's a little bit more RNG reliant and can have some tougher games. But Rock Tomb, I think almost always you're going to see good value with it. We talked about Blastoise as well. I think this character is like a solid B tier character. It's close to A tier, so I'm going to put it at the top of the B tier. And, I think again, if this is a competitive tier list, like 5v5 with draft, I might rate Blastoise a little bit higher, because Blastoise with the right partners, with the right set of supporters, can definitely be a crazy all-rounder. Pretty much if you have, either like a Clef, a soft-boiled Blissey, or a Hoopa on your team, anything that can help keep the Blastoise alive when it dives in with Rapid Spin, it can go crazy. And to the right matchups and to the right range characters, again, if they don't have much mobility, Rapid Spin will take them down. Big Unite move coverage, really good at winning fights. I think the character is solid to win games on in solo queue. The problem is you'll see even, teammates that are struggling, they get stuck as Wartortle pretty often. That's one, they're just not taking the time to go out and farm. But Blastoise, if it does have a rough start to the game, can struggle to come back if you are playing the Water Spout build, because you instantly lose any of your last hitting in the lane. And if you do go for stacks and you don't end up getting them, you can struggle a little bit. So it can be problematic. But at the same time, if you get those stacks, you hit level 13, you get that Rapid Spin plus, in the late game, this character can be a complete demon. But without a healer, I think it struggles too much for me to call it an A tier character. Solid B tier though. Invest time into it if you want. If you're a fan of Blastoise, if you like, if you like Blastoise from the mainline games and you think it's a character that's cool, I think this character will never be awful. I don't see it getting nerfed anytime soon. And it's a lot of fun. I like it. Let's talk about some more all-rounders. So we've talked about some of the really, really strong ones. Let's talk about some of the ones people consider kind of underwhelming right now. Tyranitar, probably the first D tier character, I would say. If you saw the tweet from the official Pokemon Unite account, they said you know, run the Curse Spangle on strong early game attackers like Tyranitar. Just wanted to make that clear. If you saw that, Curse Spangle does not work on Tyranitar, doesn't work on the true damage that he puts out. It only works on physical based damage, so don't do that. But this is just, I think it's a character that you can definitely win games on, but it's awkward, right? Like, do you put it in the jungle? If you do, you come out of the jungle as a Pupitar at level 5, and like, what are you supposed to do? Like, the enemy team has a Mewtwo coming out of the jungle. Even if the enemy team has like a Cinderace coming out of the jungle, right? You're just gonna get pressed down as the blue Pupitar. So yeah, I just don't know where you're supposed to put this character. It's not good in the lane. You get turbo bullied there. It's not good in the jungle. It has such an awkward like 5 through 8, where, you know, you're looking at other characters in the game. Some of them are unlocking their Unite moves, and you're still just this, you know, Metapod walking around. It is sad, but if you manage to somehow get ahead and you stay ahead on this character, it can definitely be really, really annoying to bring down. So I think the character's okay. If you want to one-trick it, you will struggle. People will dislike you. But I think you can still win 50% of your games or more if you play T-Tar and you play it well. So I do think it's a D tier character. I don't know if I'd put in the F tier. I don't even know what I would put in the F tier. But not a character I'm a big fan of right now. Charizard is a character people often talk about around T-Tar, because T-Tar is the only character that's focused around true damage right now. But Charizard used to have true damage, and ever since Charizard lost that true damage, it's a character that struggled to come back in the limelight. Like T-Tar, it's kind of awkward. Like, it doesn't really have a great lane. It is much better out of the jungle, at least. Just simply being a ranged character to chase people down with red buff is good. But as a Charmeleon, your range is still pretty low. With Flamethrower, Fire Blast, you have some good mobility around the map, and you can definitely win games as this character. So I don't think it's close to Tyranitar in the D tier. But I would say it's pretty underwhelming. You're quite underwhelming until you hit level 9. And even once you're at 9, this character is mostly only going to be useful around its Unite move. And outside of that, it can struggle. And, you know, if you ever get your Unite move stuck on someone that has an Unstoppable, which more than half the cast in the game has a way to fizzle out the Charizard Unite move, you can sometimes instantly lose a fight by it. I've heard some people trying out the curse item on Charizard. I definitely think it might have some potential. It feels fun to use around Fire Blast as well. I'm not entirely sure if Charizard's burn works on it. There's another character whose burn doesn't, but Charizard's might. I'm not too sure. Even if it doesn't, though, you do a lot of basic attacks with this character. You're constantly applying it. So it can be okay. But I struggle to know if it's truly better than Energy Amp on a character that is pretty much just a Unite move bot. Why not just run the Energy Amp? You pretty much have one item to choose. Muscle and Scope provide too much value from a damage perspective to not run on this character, in my opinion. But for its third item, Weakness Policy is not a bad option. Energy Amp, Focus Bend you could run. The new Curse item, Float Stone, I don't think is bad. But nothing really, I think, makes it excel really hard. Let's see, where should we land next? Well, speaking of characters with the burn that doesn't work with the curse items is Chandelure. So the Candle Pokemon, I think at one point you probably might have considered it an A or S tier character, but it's gotten some sizable nerfs since then. The most recent change, I guess you could consider to it, is the buff it got with the new curse item. So it doesn't work on the actual burn damage ticks from your abilities, but it does just constantly apply itself because you're always, you know, dealing damage with Overheat, which obviously is its best moveset. And I think it's not bad into a lot of the melee meta characters that we see. If you want to run this, it's a pretty good counter to Blaziken. Imprison can lock down the Blaziken and make it really annoying for them. Get a lot of free damage with Overheat. Even your Unite move can pretty much ruin a melee character's day. So if you're a fan of damage over time and applying and spreading a lot of burn damage, this is definitely a fun character for you to pick up. I wouldn't necessarily say it's, you know, like one of the premier attacker picks, but really fun, really good at bringing down tanks especially. But I would say it's probably just most of the times a worse version of Gardevoir, who I would still put in the B tier simply because well, it does have like a really big power spike once it hits level 5 with Psyshock, similar to Candle with Overheat. These characters are very similar. It's just it doesn't have a great enough early game. In competitive, you can pair this with a good tank and still manage to get by in the lane. But in solo queue, duo queue, and trio queue, unless you're duoed and trioed and playing around building up your Gardevoir, you know, no one really likes playing with the Ralts in their lane. It can oftentimes struggle to get ahead. It gets picked off by a lot of different speedsters that get played. The all-rounders can, you know, get the jump on it and one-shot them. Not having a mobility move, like I talked about into Crustle, you could even just fall and struggle into that character. And it's not particularly great into Mewtwo, who's, you know, pretty much the owner of Pokemon Unite ranked ladder right now. So yeah, it's a middle of the road character. If you like Gardevoir, go ahead, play it. I don't think there's anything special about it right now, though. Let's talk about some auto attack based characters, though. You know, stuff like Greninja, Cinderance, Duraludon, and who else is out there? Dragapult. All of these characters, all 5 of them, particularly, you know, Dura, Cinder, and Dragapult, are kind of just worse versions of Mewtwo right now. As sad as that is. I do think Cinderace is probably a little bit underrated for how much, for the potential this character has to pop off. It struggles to necessarily get ahead, but the character farms fast enough that if you do get to go to the central area, at level 5 with red buff, you can chase down a lot of people. If you manage out of your first gank as Cinderace in solo queue, if your first level 5 gank is successful and you get to dump your money and you're like 6.5 going back into your jungle, I would consider that game state to probably give you like 70% odds to win the game from there. Because from there, you should be able to comfortably hit 9 for the first objective. And having Cinders unite at the first objective, granted, you need your team to actually go and play for an objective. You have the potential to either wipe the enemy team or have probably the best secure in the game for that period of the game. And from there, you can just snowball the game. If you're really good at Cinder, you know, you get a couple kills in the end game, you just go to Ray. You just need one other teammate with you at Ray, pretty much to just help you tank it. You can bring it down and then secure it with your Unite move. So a good Cinderace player definitely can take over a game in solo queue. But if your first gank is unsuccessful, then you might struggle with keeping up with the pacing of the game. You do just lose to Mewtwo on even footing because Mewtwo is just an overstated character. But every character in the game loses to Mewtwo, so that doesn't really change much. On the other end of the auto attack based characters, though, we have Dragapult, who, like Tyranitar, is awkward. At least with this character, you can send it into the jungle, and a ranged character with red buff, like I've talked about, has the potential to take over games. But I think unlike Cinder, even if your first gank is successful, it's harder to take over games as this character, simply because your Unite move doesn't give you as good of a secure as Cinderace's does. And at the same time, you're much easier to bring down. You can go Dragon Dance with full heal. And if you manage to go infinite in some games, the character is going to look really good. But in other games, like, they get the jump on you and you're just instantly dead. You don't have, you know, 2 dash moves like Cinder does. So I think the character is a lot more troublesome to play from that position. And then not having the potential to always steal an objective from long range like Cinderace, I think makes Dragapult struggle a lot harder. And all in all, this character is probably the definition of Mewtwo at home, right? Like it's just so much worse than Mewtwo and so similar in a lot of ways that it's really unfortunate to see it rated this low. With that, I would say Duraludon probably sits somewhere in between both Cinder and Dragapult. You lack the mobility that Dragapult and Cinderace have. Much less, you have no mobility essentially. Dragon Tail is all right. But this character will always be able to win games. You put the fire on the bird and you can honestly just win games. If you were to approach the game just simply from the perspective of you're going to try to hold as much pads as you can, never make any aggressive plays, get level 13 and go and flip every single Rayquaza, this character is probably like a B tier character. If your philosophy was just to flip every game, you'd probably win like 55-ish% of your games, as long as you didn't int them in the early game and you focus never on taking any initiative around the map. And you ran from every single fight and then you just tried to flip every Ray. You'd probably climb a decent amount. But I think that kind of playstyle gets worse and worse. The higher you climb, more people are at Ray, more people take advantage of your character being worse. So I would put it in the C tier, but if you wanted to be a dirty flipper, you could probably win a lot of games as Duraludon. Decidueye is, I think, the character that I'll rate next. I'll probably put this towards the higher end of the B tier. It's close to being an A tier character. But I think with the character having such a slow start, it being a really awkward jungler, I don't think it's actually good to ever put this character in the jungle. I know a lot of people complain about lane Deci. I really don't think it's that bad in the lane. You have a lot of good harass with muscle band and your auto attacks onto the enemy laners. Leafage, while it isn't the best last hitting tool in the game, it is something. But it's very, very, very position reliant in the end game. There's a lot of characters that can really mess this character up. Any of the speedsters, Lapras, even some of the all-rounders, if they get vision of Deci's pretty much just dead. But the one benefit that Decidueye does have is once you hit level 7, if you're playing attack weight especially and you've got some attack weight stacks, or even if you're not and you're running Bangle instead, you're a character that outranges Mewtwo with your Spirit Shackles. And if you can land some good shackles on a Mewtwo and you're not completely behind, especially with people running the Safeguard combo and not having any sustain on their team, you know, you can just win games out of having some good poke to start the fight and, you know, your team following up off of that. So I think the character is solid. I'd put it somewhere between B and A tier, but I think probably B is more fair. If you played Razor Leaf Decidueye, I think it might be the only F tier character I would have so far. But with Spirit Shackle, I think it's solid. Let's round it out with the last ranged auto attackers. We'll put Glaceon as someone we can talk about as well. Greninja, another sad character. Like Lucario, I feel like this character once was like respected. Not respected as a high rated character, but it always felt like, you know, the Greninja fantasy in Pokemon Unite was so cool. Like a character that is really popular in the anime. It had its time in like the VGC kind of era. It was popular in singles for a while. The card game has had Greninja metas. Like it just feels like a character that's so important to the Pokemon IP in general. And it feels so bad that the character is so piss poor in Pokemon Unite right now. We want to talk about how it is as a jungler. If you have that first successful gank, like I've talked about, which you definitely can you take over the game as Greninja? I mean, you can take over the game as any character, but it's just, it doesn't have that oomph anymore where you unite and you pop off with Surf, because it's gotten so many nerfs throughout the 2 years that it's been out, and the characters have just gotten progressively more and more tankier, that it's just hard for Greninja to exist. Water Shuriken just doesn't feel like it's worth playing when there's things like Inteleon out. Like, do you really want to, you know, have like this consistent range damage when you could just be liquidating people? It's sad that he's a C tier character. And it's a character that I hope gets buffed. I hope Greninja gets some buffs, because as annoying as your frog teammates can be in solo queue, and maybe this is me being biased, I just think some characters should always be good. And the characters I think should always be good are like Pikachu, Greninja, Lucario, Mew, characters that are like, you know, that they're in the movies or they're in the anime. Like, I think these characters should never feel that bad. Tans, probably the person I know that has the most Greninja games. Tans, would you rate Greninja any higher, man? You know how depressing it is to be Greninja in the meta right now. It's sad. It's sad, but it's true. Yeah, as one of the best Greninja players telling you it's ass, it's probably ass, guys. Glaceon, kind of hard to rate this character, to be honest. I don't see it get played enough. I do think it's a great character. It's obviously just a worse Inteleon when you compare Liquidation and Icicle Spears, and Icy Wind's gotten some nerfs. I guess it kind of just gets bopped by Mewtwo like everything else in the game. But I'd put it up in the B tier. Like, this is a fine character. You could play this character, you could one-trick this character in your ranked games, and it would never be bad. I'm surprised I don't see it get played more. I guess it's just all the Glaceon players started playing Inteleon now. But yeah, I think it's a solid character. Good objective rip. It's not great as a laner, but if you're in the jungle, you can get back into the game just fine. And if you're creative about getting farm around the map, you can definitely end every Glaceon game like 12, 13, sometimes 14. So I think it's fine. I would say it's underrated. It's kind of weird I don't see this character played more. I would say it's one of the few characters that I'd say is pretty close to like the equilibrium line in terms of being balanced. Like, probably where you want your characters to be our Glaceon tier. But let's talk about some characters that aren't balanced at all. Urshifu. Now, it might be weird to see this character in the S tier because you don't see it get played that often on the ladder anymore. Like, it's definitely dropped in some play rate. But Single Strike Urshifu is the definition of a character that can completely take over a game. You hit level 5, you come out of the jungle, and any lane you're going to has to either outnumber you in characters, or retreat and basically let your team score as much as they want on your pad. And the way this character wins games is you have a good successful first gank, your team dumps like, you know, 60 to 70 money. Rapid Strike, yeah, Water Bear, the fast one. If I said Single Strike, I messed up. You dunk like 60 points as a team onto one pad, you go back, you farm, or you invade the enemy jungle, you come back, you break that pad, and the moment the tier 1 pads are down as Urshifu, as Water Bear, as Rapid Strike Urshifu, you completely take over the game. Yeah, I see a lot of people complaining that the curse items make it a lot harder for Urshifu to exist. I don't think it really matters. If you're good at Urshifu and you're doing your combos right, you're gonna completely take over a game. There's some good counterplay to this character that does exist, but on the ladder, you're in blind pick, you're gonna be able to take over a game. Its laning isn't great. One thing I would say to all Urshifu players out there is any build you play on Water Bear is going to be successful on Red Bear as well. So don't be afraid to sometimes flex into Red Bear. If you ended up playing in the lane and you didn't get your level 5 early on, like hitting level 5 as Urshifu and the rest of the game is level 7, you're not going to be able to dominate the game from there. Go Single Strike Urshifu. That build, that build is still an A tier build. And you can still take over the game just fine from that perspective as well. There's no shame in flexing the builds if you do somehow fall behind early game, which can happen. But overall, I'd say Water Bear, S tier, Red Bear, A tier. Overall, really strong character. The polar opposite of Urshifu, in a character that's kind of designed similarly in that it's got a build that's a tankier, kind of all-roundery build, and like a faster speedstery kind of build, is Scizor. Scizor/Scyther. I don't mean, like, it's kind of hard to rate this mon. Like, I want to put it like right in between B and C tier. And I'll put it at the end of B tier. Scyther, another pretty underrated character in the game right now. If you get ahead of Scyther and you've got some stacks, you can take over a game. It's not that long ago that Scyther was one of the best characters in the game. And yeah, it got some nerfs to its Unite move and the range went down by quite a bit. But it's not like this character got gutted from the point where it was an S tier character. The real problem with Scizor though is that in blind pick, you never know what you're playing against, and it's harder to flex the item builds between Scyther and Scizor. You could probably have a build that you could flex into either one and it'd be fine. But Scizor's problem in blind pick is you don't know what you're playing into. Scyther has similar issues as well, where in bad situations it can be bad, but a lot of characters are like that. So I'd say Scyther. If Urshifu, Water Bear is S tier, and Rapid Strike or Single Strike, sorry, is A tier, like Water S, Red Bear A, I'd say Scyther is B tier and Scizor C tier, probably. We'll talk about Mewtwo X. This is probably my most controversial opinion, I would say, and I'm probably gonna get a lot of flack for it. But I think even if you don't count the opportunity cost of not being able to have a Mewtwo on your team, like say Mewtwo doesn't exist, or say you can pick both Mewtwo's at the same time, I still think it's a B tier character. And I'll probably move Blaziken down so it doesn't look like I'm saying Blaziken's that much better than Mewtwo X. But the problem with Mewtwo X, and I know a lot of people are obviously going to disagree, and that's fine, is that it gets so like obliterated by ranged characters in the game that I feel like it just struggles to really pop off in the way that it does. Yeah, I think the character is very point and clicky. And if this tier list was like people, like if this tier list read Pokemon Unite players playing the game, but they all suck, I would say Mewtwo X is probably pretty high rated. But a character that doesn't have like a great last hitting tool, right? Is bad when it's behind and is bad into range characters. I don't think it's that great of a character. And then you want to add in the fact that you introduce the immediate opportunity cost of this character, denying your team from Mewtwo Y. Like, I just can't put it higher than B tier. And that's my opinion. If you guys disagree, I'm down to hear some counter arguments. But I'd rather have a Blaziken on my team than a Mewtwo. I actually believe that. At the very least, Blaziken can go up to an objective and secure it. Blaziken's got a good early game as well. I think the only broken thing about Mewtwo X that I think Mewtwo X needs a nerf, but only because the interactions of the character are just stupid. I think the Future Sight or whatever, I think it's Future Sight, it's point and click hook move, that needs a nerf. It could get some compensation buff somewhere else down the road. But I think if this character doesn't have a pocket and isn't able to like pop off, I don't think the character is that good. And I'm down to be wrong on that. It does have some range poke, but that doesn't have, for me, what makes a character truly great is if it has like multiple different tools, and its Unite move is just, while it is cringe, and I think this is probably the cringiest character in the B tier, it's just, I don't know. It's weird. I think the character needs to get nerfed because some of its abilities are stupid, but I don't think as a whole its kit is that powerful. But cool, let's move on from that. I'm interested in hearing some other people's opinions on it. Zacian is, this is probably the character I think is the hardest to rate between A and S tier. I gotta put it in the S tier. Now that it's gotten bug fixed, and it was confirmed that its instant charge on its boosted ability was a bug, and that's been fixed, I think it's rightfully so to put this back in the S tier. I think without that, it probably drops to like an A/B tier, maybe even. But that interaction being fixed is really important. Character is really, really strong in the lane. It's a demon in 1v1 situations. Has good objective burn, has a last hitting tool on objectives. I think, like, I comfortably think that Zacian's just a better character than Mewtwo X. So I'm happy to see that play out on the tier list as well. I think I'd rather have a Lucario over Mewtwo X as well. But yeah, I think Zacian's a good character. And you know the world is crazy now that like Zacian feels like an ethical character to play because of the existence of Mewtwo. And it wasn't that long where we were, you know, hating on Zacian. But I think the character is fun. I agree. It's kind of like Blaziken in the sense that you have like, you know, the ability to reset your cooldowns. It's pretty unique. You have a lot of different options, a lot of decisions that you're making. Character can obviously run into a lot of trouble if you make the wrong decision, which is what I think what makes games fun is when you feel like you have agency in that a good decision is rewarded and a bad decision is punished. I think that's like the thing that makes games the most fun for me, right? And Zacian fits that category so well. Like, you make bad decisions as Zacian, sometimes you can still make it out by resetting agility and just getting a shield and movement speed and running out. But you make a bad decision as Zacian and you instantly get popped, or a good decision and you pop the enemy team, is fun. The reason why Mewtwo frustrates me to no end is I feel like there's the bad decisions you have to make on Mewtwo have to be so horrendously bad where you're like double teleporting into the enemy team. And short of that, it's like so hard to mess up. But it's really easy to mess up characters like Urshifu and Zacian. So them being strong feels really fun and rewarding. But cool. Let's talk about a different set of characters now. Let's talk about some more supporters. Probably Zacian's favorite partner, Comfy. Character that's, you know, it feels broken when you have the right pocket, and it feels pretty meh when you don't have the right pocket. I think it probably sits in the trio of the other ranged supporters, in that in good scenarios, it can be an S tier character. In bad scenarios, in not great scenarios, it can be a B tier character. And in average scenarios, it's an A tier character. I think what sucks about Comfy's reputation is you see a lot of people just sit inside the best character on their team and just hold down the heal button essentially. And that seems like all the Comfy gameplay there is. But I promise you there's so much more than that. I think hitting good grass knots, I think bouncing in and out of characters to maximize your healing output. I think weaving in meaningful damage with your boosted is so important. Like, if you've watched me play Comfy, I'll regularly end games with like 6, 7 knockouts. Not because I'm doing so much damage, but just because I'm there at the right time to get the finishing knockout. Obviously, you could just sit inside a Mewtwo, sit inside a Water Bear, sit inside a Zacian, sit inside a Mewtwo X, and you'd probably be fine. But I think if you play this character more in a dynamic way, it can be a lot of fun. I wouldn't one-trick it in solo queue because you might lose your mind. But I think don't shy away from picking it sometimes. I enjoy having a couple Comfy games every day. But maybe I'm just a crazy support player. Who knows? Let's finish off all the supporters that are left in the game. We'll talk about the last real healer that's left. and then we'll talk about the supporters that are more supportive in their disruptive nature. So Clef, I think I'm probably gonna put at the top of the B tier. Your Moonlight healing output is great, but it requires like a good team comp to truly take advantage of it. And in some games, it'll feel like an S tier character, and in other games, it'll feel a lot worse. Particularly, my problems with Clefable are that its Unite move can be kind of underwhelming. Famously, if you guys know my Clefable, every single UCS game I've played at Rayquaza, I've rolled block. Which, if you're playing for the team that needs to damage the last hit it, it's kind of depressing. And you also just, once you go Follow Me, which is I think the better of the two disruptive moves it has, you have absolutely no damage. So if you're stuck in a lane and you need to secure last hits, you pretty much have no option to outlast hit anything in the game. The best thing you can do is prep a boosted attack, Follow Me, and then use your booster to secure things like Indeedee or Bunnelbees in that stage of the game. So yeah, your disarming voice in the early game is solid, but outside of that, not having last hit tools, unreliable Unite move, and the introduction of the new curse items, I definitely think Clefable is a healer that got hurt the most by the curse items. So I do think it probably sits in the B tier, which is fine. It's absolutely fine for it to be a B tier character. As for the other supporters in the game, I would probably put Wiggly in the C tier. Wiggly notoriously has been more of like a defender or a tank than a supporter, and it still kind of fulfills that role, but it just gets outclassed by a lot of other defenders. In a world where Lapras and Umbreon exist, what value does Wigglytuff really provide to you? It's one of its best things is to pair it with a strong laner that has the ability to get good knockouts. So if you do find yourself in a lane with like Inteleon or Mew, the moment you hit 4, you can activate Sing and help secure knockouts, and that can be really good to snowball games. But particularly in solo queue, you're not going to get those great matchups. You're going to be stuck in lane with like a Dragonite or a Tyranitar or a Cinder, Greninja, Dragapult, all these like really weak early game laners, and you don't do anything really to have good gameplay from there. That plus you're going to run into games where the enemy team is an Umbreon who has a direct counter to your Unite move, making this character really, really sad to be a one-trick and consistent player of. Mime, I think I would want to rate Mime higher than Wiggly, and I'd put it in the C tier. Simply because I think Mime has a lot more tools to individually have an impact on the game. You have good last hitting. I think you just always go Confusion. If you're Barrier Confusion, you'll always have solid last hitting. And your Unite move, you can dive some range characters in the game. You could put a lot of pressure on them. The enemy team has a lot of melees, and you set up some good barriers. You can do solid. You can do some work. If you end up playing stacking Mime, you can, one-hit combo a lot of characters in the game as well. So I don't think it's extraordinary as a mon, but I think it's fine. I don't think the character needs nerfs. I don't think it needs buffs. It's just a solid B tier character. And I would put Sableye in a similar spot, maybe a little bit higher. I think the character Sableye can be tough to win games with, but it's a character that definitely terrorizes your opponents. So there's got to be some merit in just tilting the face out of your opponents. And Bangle Feint Attack is just fun. I don't know. I don't think the character is like exceptional right now. I know that there were some buffs planned in the test server that they didn't end up doing, and I think that's probably good. The problem with Sableye and solo queue is like you can make so much space around the map, but your teammates might not take advantage of that necessarily well, and the vision might not be as useful. But I think the character is fun. It can definitely win games by putting your team ahead on XP. But in blind pick, you're gonna run into this issue where even if you have Bangle, playing into healers can be annoying because they can help sustain the sustain your enemies from your poke damage. But I think if you're willing to flex into Confuse Ray, that might not be as big of an issue. But that rounds out the supporters. Let's go ahead and talk about the remaining defenders that we have left. Now, these defenders all have varying different roles and expectations in the meta. So let's talk about Slowbro and Snorlax, who are both more traditional kind of defenders. Slowbro, I would say, is a solid A tier character. Like, I think a lot of people expect this to be in the S tier just because its Unite move is so good. But we're not really in a melee heavy kind of meta. Like, yeah, there's some, you know, it has a really good matchup to be able to Unite move these guys down. But the problem Slowbro has is, one, it gets absolutely demolished by ranged characters. And two, even into the melee characters, if the enemy team has two melees and they both dive the bro at the same time, and the Slowbro is like level 10 or level 11 in the end game, which you might end up at a lot of games like that, you might just get popped before you can even ult. Or you're going to Unite move one person and you'll die to the other one. There's just so much incidental damage from ranged characters that I don't know how viable it is for Slowbro to consistently pop off. But that being said, you're a strong laner, you have good CC, your Unite move is still good. So I don't think it's a bad character by any means. It sounds like I'm ripping on Slowbro. I just don't think it's that impressive, and I wouldn't put it in the S tier. Snorlax, the other traditional defender, I think has a much sadder kind of sadder story in that Snorlax never really feels that bad. But lately I've been feeling like, especially in solo queue games where I'd be able to, you know, win a lot of time as Snorlax and put a lot of pressure on the map, he just struggles to stay alive. If you run into an Umbreon, your Unite move gets really, really badly countered. So many curse items around the game right now where your Unite move just, you know, it used to feel like your Unite move was a second life, and now it feels more like you can pretty much just use it for the stuns. And if you're just using it for that, I feel like there might be better characters that you can play. The early game, obviously one of the best early games in the game. You can help enable and get a character, a weak laner, out of the game. So if your team does have a Gardevoir that's going into the lane, I think Snorlax is a really good Gardevoir pair. It helps your guard get XP, and it's a good setup for the guard. And characters similar to guard, you know, Decidueye. Even if your team wants to run like, you know, lane Cinder, lane Ninja, stuff like this, you can help really enable those characters in the lane. But outside of that, it just feels underwhelming. But cool. Let's talk about some more defenders here. Trevenant is another character. Better than Snorlax for sure. But would I rate this on the same tier? It's a tough one. I'm struggling to see if I put it all the way in the A tier. I'd say it probably sits in the B tier as well. My issue with Trevenant is that the range characters really, really bully this mon as well. And if he falls behind, especially into all the curse items that are in the game right now, he dies so much faster than he once used to. And I would say that you should probably be expecting the enemy team to always have a curse item. And if they don't, good for you. Probably a better character. But if there's a character that got nerfed by the curse items the hardest, I'd say it's Tree. You lose good potential from your focus band, from your passive ability, and it's early game also as a defender, not that great. If you struggle to hit 5, it can be troublesome. But I think it's a good B tier character. I don't think it's that bad. Mamoswine, on the other hand, I think also a B tier character, probably sits around maybe like a little bit higher. maybe like somewhere in the middle of the B tier, I'd say. In between Tree and Snorlax. Definitely don't think the character is bad. Much better early game than Tree. It can put a lot of pressure on some range characters that tanks might traditionally struggle with. Definitely not as nerfed by the curse items as other mons. But I think fully unlocking your potential at level 9, kind of annoying for tanks. Its Unite move isn't as impactful as other ones. You really need a eject button for your Unite move to succeed. And, you know, you look at Blastoise, Blastoise's Unite move with eject, you can, you know, not like stun the entire enemy team while dealing significant damage. Mamoswine with eject move, you're doing like a Blastoise ult on one person, basically. Maybe two if they really clumped badly. So, yeah, I think the mon is not bad. Just don't think it's exceptional. So, I think it's fine. Let's see. Let's talk about Goodra. I think Goodra probably in the lower end of the B tier. It is classified as a defender, but I think it's better to look at Goodra more like a Tyranitar kind of character. You need to scale. You need your levels. It's much better in the early game than Tyranitar. I just think Goodra is just a better version of T-Tar in almost every way. And the character's been getting slowly buffed every patch, which I think was making it better and better. But now that the curse items are out, like Tree, this character feels a lot worse into that. If you do happen to have a good healer on your team, you couple that with Muddy Water, and I think the character is really solid into other melees. It's a good, like, melee, anti-melee character. But into other range characters, if you miss your Power Whip, if they dodge it, you're just going to get kited and damaged down and have a tough time. So I think it's a solid B tier character. But towards the end of the B tier, where I would put Tree on the higher end of the B tier. Then finally, Greedent. Keep in mind, this is for like solo queue and ladder. You could extend it to duos and trios as well. I'd put Greedent up here in the B tier as well. It's close to the C tier, but not quite. But I think one of the good things about Greedent is that it can completely take over games in good scenarios. So if you do end up going against characters like, you know, Decidueye and Cinders and Greninjas, unless those characters have had a really good start to the game, which traditionally they don't in solo queue, you can completely take them over, even putting pressure on Mewtwo sometimes. That being said, its early game can be underwhelming into, you know, stronger lane setups. If you do happen to go against characters that can A-press you down in the early game, you might struggle with getting some last hits. And overall, I think it's a fine character. Like anything else in the B tier, you can pick it every game and you're not going to be completely throwing. Unless you're griefing your team's composition by picking a 5th damage dealer when they already have 4 of them. Any character that's B tier and above, you can pick it and it's fine. It's just it might have counterparts that can fulfill its role similarly but better. It is funny to see Crustle rated higher than Greedent, because for a long time Greedent was always just a better version of Crustle, but I feel like they've both kind of fit into their own niches now, which is nice. That rounds out the defenders. Let's move on to the attackers, because we've got quite a bit of these as well, and we'll try to get through some of these a little quicker. A9, I think A9, you put it beside Pikachu. Historically, these characters have always been paired together on tier lists, and then for a while, A9, after it got its Blizzard buffs, was just a better version of Pika in every way. And now I'd say it's close. I think they're interchangeable. Pika has longer range with its combo, can hit over walls. A9's range is smaller, but it has that instant knockback and a lot more damage on frontline characters. They're both good with the new curse items. A9's Unite move is more burst-oriented. Pikachu's is more, you can use it frequently, and so a little bit better damage over time. So I think they're both solid characters. Pretty similarly rated though. Let's talk about Delphox. I think this is a solid. Put it in the A tier. I think Fire Spin Delphox is probably a pretty underrated character to play on the ladder. It's really, really disruptive, has really good matchups into a lot of characters. Couple it with the new curse item, and Delphox feels like just a really good utility mage who also has the potential to play that mystical fire flame charge build and really just go infinite if you happen to get ahead with that build. So I think it's really, really strong. It does have some points of the game where it really struggles. Like you put it in the jungle and you pop out at level 5. What do you really do with that? You go to the lane and you have some decent lasting tools in lane, but once you hit like, you know, level 4, level 5, you kind of fall behind other characters. So I think it's a character where, you know, you'll hear me say this a lot, but it's a character that needs to be ahead to be successful if you play the damage build, but it lacks the tools to get ahead sometimes. That being said, if you find ways to get ahead, and it's the right composition, the character will pop off. Cramorant, on the other hand, is an awkward Pokemon. Like, it feels weird putting it in the B tier, but I do think it deserves a spot like towards the lower end of the B tier. Right now in particular, it's bugged. So right now you might be inclined to put it even lower, but you know, running on the under the assumption that they'll fix the bug, I think this character definitely has some potential to pop off, but you know, it can be kind of scary running it into the field of good characters. It's a really strong laner. You take down the farm really, really quickly. The Mage Cram build is okay. It's a lot of burst damage, but it is probably just a worse version of Pikachu if you decide to play it that way. Worse version of Pika or A9. But, I mean, it's a lot of burst. The Dive Air Slash build is the one that's bugged for those of you guys that don't know. Dive Cram, after you use your dive, gives you a free boosted attack. That boosted attack is meant to be enhanced damage. Right now, that enhanced damage isn't being applied. So, yeah, assuming they fix that bug, I would probably keep it here. If not, I might move it down a little bit. So, just something to keep in mind for the current patch without that bug being fixed. Venusaur, on the other hand, I would also put this character in the B tier. You know, if I'm putting Delphox in the A tier, I think Venusaur deserves its spot up there too. I think Energy Amp is what makes this character really strong. So if you're not playing Energy Amp on Venusaur, I would not put this in the A tier. But with both builds, Energy Amp turns your Unite move and your subsequent abilities right after it into Demon mode. Whether you're playing Petal Dance and you run in to get more damage with Petal Dance and Giga Drain, or you beam off of your Unite does insane burst, and you couple it with any other burst you have, and the character goes pretty crazy. It can struggle though. The character is one of the, probably the most level 13 reliant attacker in the game. Maybe Mew might be the other one, but this character's difference between 12 and 13 is insane. If you're playing Petal Dance, you get a larger radius. You get all the stats for Petal Dance are relevant. So HP, defense, special defense, special attack, even attack. Every stat in the game is relevant for that character. So you get a big bump. You also get a big 10% cooldown reduction bump as well from 12 to 13, making it really important for Petal Dance. And then for Solar Beam, you get enhanced Solar Beam, which, you know, you get a faster cast rate on it. You get lower cooldown on it. You get that cooldown reduction, all those stats once again. So it's such a big difference between 12 and 13. And sometimes you can struggle to hit 13 in solo queue games that aren't going that well. But that being said, I think the Mon is really, really strong. Definitely a character I don't see getting nerfed anytime soon. So a good character to spend time into as well. The last of the two evolutions, Espeon, I'd say probably the top of the B tier, maybe at the bottom of the A tier. We'll put it at the bottom of the A tier. I think this character, similar to A9 and Pikachu, has really good potential to do range burst from a range. Honestly, maybe I'd put it even higher. This character is really good. Good lane last hitting with Psyshock. Really good, frontline damage with Psyshock and Psybeam. The only issue I think it has is its Unite move is a little bit harder to get value from than things like A9 and Pikachu. Its Unite move is more defensive oriented. So it's good if the enemy team is running into you, but a lot of times they'll run into you with full heal, and then you're kind of just a sitting duck in your Unite move. But I think it's a solid character. It gets its Unite move earlier than other characters, which is relevant as well for it in the pool of characters that it's in. And it's a character that can get your team really far ahead. Stored Power Future Sight can be fun too in the right scenarios, but it isn't the build I would say you can reliably be successful with. And then we've got Sylveon. I'd say I rate Sylveon, sort of similarly. I'll probably put it in B tier. And I know this might be shocking to some people, but the problem with Sylveon is that both of its builds have like some really good matchups and some really bad matchups. So Mystical Fire can be really strong into a special attack heavy team, but in blind pick, you don't know. So say you committed to a Mystical Fire build and you put the Muscle Band on and you get into a team that's like really attack based. Now you're, that extra value you get from Mystical Fire, reducing their special attack, kind of goes away. Say you commit to a Hyper Voice build and the enemy team has 2 Speedsters on their team. You don't really have a lot of options to dodge, Zoroark or Dodrio damage. You're just gonna get ruined by them. Even like Urshifu, you see a lot. Maybe the enemy team doesn't have a lot of tanks for you to Hyper Voice off of. I think because it has such bad matchups in blind pick, it's hard to rate it too highly. But I think this character is a character that gets better in draft. So if this is a draft tier list, I might rate this a little higher. But for blind pick and what most of us are normally playing, I think that's just something you have to keep in mind. And maybe I'll put it more closer to the middle for some of those reasons. Cool, we've got 2 roles left, All-Rounders and Speedsters. I think I can knock out these Speedsters pretty quickly. Because I'm not much of a Speedster player, so my thoughts on these would be a little bit limited, but I can still talk to them. I would say Talonflame, probably the best of the one that are left. I'll put it somewhere towards the end of the B tier. The good thing about Talonflame is it has a good matchup into some of the characters that are really annoying to deal with. One being Inteleon. Into Liquidation Inteleon, one of the things that's really unique about Talonflame is if you ever get a decent flank angle and you get to Flame Charge on top of the Inteleon, which a lot of Inteleon players will let you do in solo queue, you get to Flame Charge on top of it, start autoing it down, and if it tries to cast Liquidation on you, which is what it'll do against a lot of Speedsters that are diving it, it'll Liquidation and run away, and you'll take so much of your life bar. Talonflame just gets to go into Fly, invulnerable to Liquidation, and then jump on its head and knock it out. And I think it has a good matchup into a lot of different characters in the game as well. But if you're playing into a lot of tanks, which can happen in blind pick, character starts to become more and more useless. Its Unite move can be hit or miss. It's a very telegraphed Unite move. So, I think it's a solid B tier character, a character you can definitely invest time into, but definitely not one of the best either. Gengar, I think I probably put it... It's annoying to put it in the D tier because I don't think it's as bad as Dragapult or Tyranitar. So I will put it in the C tier. I know a lot of people, especially in the YouTube comments, are going to be like, respectfully, I disagree with Gengar. A good Gengar is an A tier character. And just try to remember that apply the same standard of skill level that you would to one character to the other. A good Gengar might be able to pop off, but a good anything rated above it is also going to pop off. Maybe like 2 out of, you know, maybe like 1 out of 5 Gengar games, you might go crazy mode, get like a Quadra, go infinite off Dream Heater, Shadow Ball Dream Heater, and it might feel really good. But it's a character that needs levels to succeed, isn't a particularly good laner, doesn't do much out of the jungle out of its first gank, and needs to play the end game, you know, really well. And, you know, some games you're just going to end up being the 20k damage Gengar doing nothing for your team. And maybe some other games you might pop off. But I think most of the time you're going to struggle. I think most of the time you will struggle. Zera, I think, is an underrated speedster. I want to put it in the B tier. I'll put it towards the end of the B tier. You know, unlike Gengar, you hit level 5 now that it's been buffed. Out of the jungle, you actually have some good options, you know? You chase people down with Volt Switch and Red Buff. Even Spark and your Wild Charge combo is not bad either. But I think Volt Switch Discharge, ever since it went to 5 and 7, I think this character is not bad. Again, it fits that category of like, out of your first jungle gank, you can be successful because you have good tools to be successful. And if you are, you can completely take over a game from there. But it does struggle into the field of a lot of the stronger characters that are out there. A lot of these S tier characters completely just destroy Zera. Like, it's really hard to dive on top of a Zacian. The Water Bear is just going to beat you up. Even Blissey ult off your engage can be troublesome. You're going to get liquidated. You're going to get Perish Songed. You're going to get Mewtwo'd. So it doesn't fare well into a lot of the meta picks. But into some of the other picks, you can definitely have decent Zera games. So I don't think it's awful, but I would put it in the B tier. Absol, on the other hand, I think it's probably the only speedster I would put in the D tier. Like, maybe you could have an argument in the C tier, only because these characters are so bad. Maybe I would do this instead, and this might look better. But I'll put it in the C tier. It just feels pointless to play Absol when you could play literally any of the other speedsters. I feel like all the other speedsters do what Absol does, but better. You know, you want to have a character that's really strong out of the jungle right away to gank, without needing to like scale up or whatever. Why not be Leafeon? Why not be Zoroark? You know, you want a character that can one-shot people, you know, hide in a bush and one-shot people. Why not be Zoroark? Why not be Leafeon? Why not be Dodrio? Why not be why not just be any other speedster in the game? And then you get to the Ray fight, and how do you even play the Ray fight? Like, you have to find a flank where you're one-shotting someone in a game where you probably don't have enough damage to one-shot people. You want to say, oh, Absol with the support behind it's really, really good, but any of the speedsters with the support behind it are really, really good. So no. Let's talk about the remainder of the all-rounders though, and that'll probably round out the tier list as well. I don't think any of these, you know, to spoil it, are going to be in the D tier. So I do think these are the only D tier characters. And intentionally, I'm going to leave the F tier blank because I don't think any of these characters or anything in the game is F tiered. We'll start with Buzzwole, who I think is probably like a middle of the road B tier kind of character. It's got its good matchups and it's got some bad matchups. But it can take over a game completely on its own, or it can have a game where you feel kind of useless. That being said, you have a good laning phase, good, decent last hitting. If you get ahead in the game early, you completely bully whoever is in there. The only issue I have with it is its Unite move can be kind of inconsistent. It's kind of telegraphed when it's about to happen. If you're not ahead, you can't really just engage with your Unite move and try to take someone down. And, you know, whereas like you expect a lot of characters with their Unite move can go out and do something immediately with it, Buzzwole requires a bit better of a setup to find success. Azumarill, I'd say also somewhere in the B tier. I'll put it a little bit lower rated than Buzzwole. Not an exact science of where they're rated, just general feels. You know, D's a little bit worse in the lane than Buzzwole, but it scales up a little bit quicker. The main thing about Azumarill is it's kind of like the all-rounder version of Leafeon, where it's your job, you get your Unite move at 8, you Unite move someone, right after you Unite move, you know, hopefully your knockout is successful, you go and cap, try to get the remainder of your stacks up, and then you get your Unite move back, you farm a little, you Unite, you farm, you Unite, you farm. So it's pretty linear in terms of how you play the map with it, but it can be pretty strong and you can find some success with it. Aegislash, a character that recently got buffed. I'll put it's a C tier character, guys. I see a lot of people hyping this character up after its buffs, but after seeing it get playing it a little bit, I still don't think I don't think it makes up for the weaknesses that this character has. You have a pretty bad early mid game where like your level 5 to 7 is pretty horrendous. If you're a character that's behind, you can't really come back into the game. You don't farm like extraordinarily fast. And again, with its Unite move, it doesn't have a Unite move that can just forcibly win against a skirmish. It's not like you can go up to someone and ult them and then boom, you're getting a kill. Whereas like Azumarill, right? Like you're on the map, someone uses like their full hero or their mobility spell, cool. I can engage with my Unite and guaranteed probably get a kill. Aegislash doesn't really work the same way, which I think is a problem for winning games, especially on the ladder. You do have a good securing tool, which is nice, but it can be a struggle to even get into a good spot where you're going to be able to ult anyways to secure. Machamp. I think Machamp's an underrated solo queue character. I don't see why more people don't play this character. Obviously, you can talk about my quarterback build where I play an XP share submission. No one knows how to play that build, so I'm not gonna rate that on the tier list. The quarterback is the true Q tier champion though. But dynamic cross drop or dynamic close combat is a fine character. Like you can definitely one shot a lot of characters in the game. You have a good laning phase, good last sitting in lane. I think it's underrated. You could probably play this character a lot more than it's being played and find success. Obviously, the issue with it being that it's a level 9 character, so if you do fall behind in the mid game, it can struggle. Like if you happen to be in the lane where that Mewtwo's ganking, you might be able to struggle. But if you're smart about playing this character, you're finding farm in the enemy jungle, you're adventuring around the map, you're getting 9, you're playing out of bushes, you're using dynamic eject combo to get on top of people, and I think it has some good options to be able to play. Dragonite, I probably put in the B tier as well. Where I'd put Machamp maybe a little bit closer to a higher rating. Somewhere like here, I'd put Dragonite close to the end. The thing about Dragonite is that it'll always have the option to win games with Hyper Beam. So if you do go Dragonite's Hyper Beam and you're in the jungle, you're just gonna win games off of it secure. Like you have good damage on objectives and you have an incredibly strong secure. So you can just win games off that. The Outrage build, inconsistent for sure, but another character that can just win games off of that. If you do happen to get ahead. It is really, really bad in the lane, so I wouldn't recommend this as a laning character, But if you do get to go into the jungle, you can definitely put a lot of pressure on the map. So I think it's solid, just not that great. Pretty middle of the pack character. And then finally Garchomp, who I think again, people undervalue this character. I don't think it's actually as bad as people make it out to be. Like it just does too much damage with its auto attacks, and it can burn down farm and objectives too quickly for it to ever be bad. And if you remember what I said at the start of the tier list, is Blaziken is a really strong character as well. For one particular reason on the map, and it's being able to Dragon Rush or Blaze Kick the bees. Just that interaction alone, like you hit level 5, and every time the bees spawn, unless like you're hard losing on the map, if you have positioning to be able to Dragon Rush them towards your side, that's just extra farm you accumulate throughout the game. And the Dragon Rush, Dragon Claw combo, being able to catch people out, Unite moving on to characters that don't have a lot of mobility. Just think the character has a lot of potential. So I do think you can play it. And I think it sits comfortably in the B tier. And that's the end of the tier list. Mimikyu isn't out yet. So I'll put it in the F tier because it's unreleased. But I genuinely don't think there's a character worthy of being an actual F tier character. I think everything in the game feels decent. I think if the tier list didn't have, if Mewtwo just didn't exist, I'd be a lot happier. And I'd say anything that's above, like B and above, I feel like are characters that are worth playing in the meta right now. Like you could one trick any of these characters, and I'll put Mewtwo at the front here just so it looks a little cleaner here. But anything B and above is fine. I would lean towards not really playing these C tier characters, because I do think you can run into issues on consistently winning games. Maybe I'll rate Dura a little higher, but overall I think I'm pretty happy. I'm happy with this, so we're not going to make any changes, but I'll explain anything that people feel really confused about.